Hi there, welcome to the Noah Presgrove case. Today we continue the interesting themes in regard to the cause of death with Noah Presgrove, the highway situation, the possibilities of falling out of a moving vehicle, and how one would end up alongside the line of the road on the hard shoulder. Is it possible or not, considering the direction one is going in, possibly? I'm going to be acknowledging Justin Roy's comments and thoughts about that, and some reference to Texas Boys too. I've responded as well, and I'll be adding on today with another, reconstruction of how things could have come about, just to understand the possible physics behind it. I'm no expert, I'll be honest with you, but just to work it out, put it into a visual perspective and form of learning, and go from there, because take in mind, when it comes to hard evidence or video recordings or CCTV, none of it, in terms of at the time of the death, seems to exist. So by doing these reconstructions or deconstructions, it's just an alternative way. It's better than nothing, but unfortunately, not everybody seems to approve or appreciate it. In the moment, we focus in on specifically Noah Presgrove, and I think that's what a few cretins have failed to acknowledge over time, is that if there is ever any drama or conflict or me defending myself, if there's other stuff to be talking about and in the video itself, that's put first, and then later the conflict and the responses later. There is an order to it. There is a hierarchy, and the consistent hierarchy is Noah Presgrove first, drama conflict second, and or additional separate light-hearted things. It can be within the same video itself, the content, but it's separated and it's in the correct order as it should be in levels of importance. And a lot of people in the community like to preach about, this is all about Noah. This is what it should be about. Not all the other petty stuff, not all this, not all that. And yet, I'm just the symbolism of what they say, which they can never recreate themselves because of the order of how I do things and what I do first. Of course, an intro is always required, just so you know what's going to happen today. And the order of it, first of all, because I thought as a standalone video it would be too short, I just want to acknowledge an indirect viewer requested video in which there is a question by Michelle, and I want to respond back to it in regard to the case, the communities. What's the communities, the groups have been like? Are they important? Have they been of use more so in recent time? How has it gone overall? I want to give you my input on that first and see where we go there. And then I can move on to the Justin Roy comments and the main theme of today's video. But just be sure to stick around. Let me know your thoughts. If you are here during the live premiere, welcome. Share your live reactions in the chat box located on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you do want to leave additional comments, thoughts, or questions, even answers, be sure to drop them down below under this video and I can respond back at a later point like I've done previously. If you are interested in recent coverage by me, top right corner of the screen where the eye symbol is, click on that. You get the drop down box with the full playlist of all the videos that I've done up to now and some loose ones from last night and days before. It's worth catching up on, and or just the live chat itself, so you know what's going on and how things have been. Some people could say it's heated, but it is where it is. It will happen somewhere, and if you can document it in the moment, it might be of benefit and value for you in the future. It might even save you. But clearly, as we've seen, there's some incompetent, impetuous people who can't even acknowledge that. But it's unfortunate. It is where it is. Now, big shout out to everyone that was able to watch last night, and more so during the live premiere and the additional comments later in regard to the birthday wishes and messages, as last night was, well, not last night, yesterday was my birthday, did a video, so it was all positive to see. And of course, big shout out to everyone that showed support towards the channel, whether that be a super chat or a super sticker. I can't remember everybody's names, but you know who you are. And of course, big shout out to those in the background as well, elsewhere. And just as a heads up, once again, if anyone does want to support the channel at any point in time, an alternative, more practical, efficient way will be found down below in the comment section, pinned message, where there's a link to become a channel member, and the main one, the PayPal link, in which the percentage cut, what they take away, is tiny, like 4 or 5% compared to YouTube, where they take away 30 to 40%. It's crazy. But that aside, big shout out to everyone who's been present recently and have shown support, and as well those that have shown support with just comments and ideas, answering questions, and much more. With that being said, I'm just going to jump into the recent question, give my point of view from my experience. Could be limited in some areas, but there's no harm. Anybody else that have been in different groups and platforms, as a witness, you can share what you think and how it's gone for yourself. I know, there'll be people out there that may have been blocked, banned from pages and have never had access since. As for me, yes, there's been some blocking or kicking and it's been accidental or it's been misunderstood, and it turned out somewhat okay in the end. So that aside, I'll just be basing it off the quality of these different groups and what they've done for the case, good or bad, and maybe more so in recent time. So in no particular order, well, actually, I'll do it in a particular order, Michelle. When it comes to the first group or page I came across and used quite heavily would be the Army page, because it was helpful when starting off for the very first time, because I started covering the case around June 1st, 2024. Obviously, those on the Army page, and, before that, whether they were on the page or not, whatever time that was created, there would have been people on the case and researching the case from 2023, almost at the very start, depending if you were aware of the case at the time, maybe you were a local, friend of friend, family of family, etc. You'd be more involved much earlier on. So there's a lot of catching up to do, and for a length period of time, for quite a few months, the Army page was good, and temporarily, when I was present, it was public. Then it did go private because of being under threat by fake accounts, profiles, I guess from the dark side and beyond. But once that was resolved and it was private, the conversations continued on, the different posts, theories, ideas, what people thought, who people thought was responsible. And for a period of time, there's a lot of finger pointing towards Jack Newton, and there was quite a few bold words mentioned. Whilst Michael Fazekaz may say at times, no one has blamed the partygoers for being the murderer or a murderer. No one has jumped on Jack Newton in that way. Well, I've seen it as a witness with my own eyes. I've mentioned that Jack Newton's timeline and how he says stuff can be inconsistent, but also not always from him. His own timeline, what he's collected and what he's been told. And that's a problem because it's not his actual timeline. It's more of a collective one. That's a problem in my opinion. And whilst I do mention these slight critiques or observations, still I can acknowledge that in defense of some people that have been saying, yeah, these partygoers have been attacked or questioned full on. And when Michael says, no, they haven't, well, maybe at a point in time, or maybe on a certain page it wasn't, but overall, what I've seen, for example, on the Army page, there was a strong presence of people saying, in their own words, that Jack Newton is the murderer, is the killer, guaranteed 100% with a lot of confidence. People really jumping on in a bold, rushed way, something I wouldn't want to do or feel comfortable doing because it can backfire massively. And depending on the position you're in, it can be a lot worse and intense. So you've got to be careful with language and wording. Not everybody was. But, for learning, trying to get a grip of the case, or at least what I believed was somewhat true or possible, the Army page was good, was helpful at the time. After that, branching off, I believe, to the Reddit page. I'm not going to give a full backstory behind everything because I probably have done already, but I'm just mentioning the pros and cons. The Reddit page, the main Reddit one, not the alternative in recent time. The main one was fine. It was very good because they were able to archive and repost things from Facebook, which were more in the past. So it was a way of being able to find it easily and catch up on stuff. Screenshots, statements from Caden Pressey to Caleb Newton, Jack Newton here and there, maybe Jasmine Millan, the Snapchat post, the Reddit page, the main one was very helpful, very useful at the time, very good at the archives and repost. That's something where Reddit shined the most. And as for the Facebook page, well, that just continued on with the next discussion. So, both did help in trying to learn. But was it the absolute truth? Maybe not quite, but you wouldn't know at the time, and other people wouldn't quite know either. It's with the progression over time when you hear more stories and sides, evidence coming out, partners in true crime interviews, Caden Pressey, etc., that type of stuff. Even what Justin Roy, when he did his interview, you start learning more so from some of the horses' mouths. And then that could change, counter previous points of forms of learning from these different pages, but there's just a process. And as long as it's maybe ticked off the list, refined, corrected, then it's okay. And if you're a part of it in the moment, you can learn more easier. When it came to the alternative Reddit page, though, it was okay, but got a little bit petty at one point, which was unfortunate, and got kicked very unjustly. Shouldn't have happened. There was other problematic people present, but there we go, it is what it is. Not a major loss, not a major gain either, and not used since. Serves no purpose to me. So there we go there. Then, moving on to the case discussion page, that was different. It was a little bit more in the middle in regard to who's present on the page, and shows maybe more so now. Some people from the light side, the army page, some people from the dark side, the Sofa Sleuth page, gathering in the middle. Bit back and forth, may not always be stable, but there are some alternative points, more theory-based, may not always be as factual at the time of when I was kind of around, and the Vanessa Salazar situation, because they were a part of that page, and some other people. Of course, there was a time where there was a misunderstanding with being kicked myself, but that was resolved afterwards, which is okay. It was a bit of like a middle ground, which is kind of a positive if you felt like you wanted to hear it from other points of views, counterpoints and whatnot, unpopular opinions. You go to the case discussion page. At this moment in time, maybe it's worse because there's a bit more control, censoring, posts being removed, deleted, even when mistakes are made by the moderator or the owner themselves. When they get something wrong, then they've got to apologise afterwards, but they're quick to say, if anyone fakes this or that, we're going to delete it immediately. And then quick to say, well, this is fake, that's a lie. But then evidence is provided. Oh, sorry. Not setting a good example. That could apply to Michael Facecast to a small extent, but that's just an observation, that is all. In terms of the Sofa Sleuth page, brief presence there because it's only recent. The Sofa Sleuth page, more so in recent time, you could argue has been a lot more harder hitting, in my opinion, at least, for what I've witnessed or what's been passed on or reposted elsewhere, depending on how you want to interpret it. See, in terms of the sharpness levels at points in times, I would say the army page back then, the sharpness levels were welcoming and fine and somewhat positive. In terms of the outlook, though, of who could be responsible, what's the cause of death, quite sharp towards Jack Newton more so, but very in support of Caden Pressey. That's like how it was. Case discussion group, sharp from both ends, both spectrums, depending what side is present at what time, same time or separate, one after the other, back forth, like a tug of war. The Sofa Sleuth page, more so in recent time, not directly from my perspective, but I do understand what other people have been getting at in recent time. But in terms of my coverage, which may use some of that material done in different ways, more controlled, we'll get to that very shortly, is that the Sofa Sleuth page, harder hitting, maybe more so negative, but the dark reality at times. The Sofa Sleuth page, whilst there might have been conversations, discussions, and mentions about certain groups or named individuals, which could be deemed in a negative or insulting ways, people may have heard about or gained intel in the background back in the past, and people talking behind other people's backs, and some people from the Sofa Sleuth page then going to the case discussion or the army page, and people from the army page or case discussion saying these are snakes in the grass, Pam Feldman Garrison, snake in the grass, as other people had said. Then a few other people joining the dark side, crisscrossing over, trying to gain info from one place to hear what other people say, then going back to wherever they come from, and then passing it on. Things like that happened. But, in terms of recently, like with those Snapchat posts, the Caden Pressy, recorded video of that first phone call with Anthony Linares, hard-hitting, more so from the horse's mouth, some kind of hard evidence, which is photo-based, video-based, audio-based, is what's imported. What's more important, which has been imported, brought onto the page itself, and at times a source given to. Army page at a later point did provide some context in regard to some post with maybe a timestamp, but maybe more so in the early days it was lacking, and some stuff may have been cropped down and edited to an extent, whether people interpret that as to force a narrative without the full picture, or if it was just cut down because people wanted to focus and concentrate on one word, one line, one comment by one person without the other overall picture, which would help. So there's that, but people can probably throw that back at the Sofa Sleuth page at times. At the end of the day, no page, no group out there is perfect. Mistakes may have been made along the way. The true measure is, and what needs to be looked at is, are continuous mistakes made, or things slightly improved with time? And in recent time, because of the material that has been passed on and hard-based evidence, it's been more so from the dark side, more so from Sofa Sleuth, more of a darker possible reality, which not everybody wants to see that possible dark truth. So that's why it's led to higher resistance levels from some people on the light side, insults, whingy, whiny behaviour directed at me. It is what it is. Would have been better to see true colours of people from the start, but it's always dragged out. That's just how it is, typical. But yeah, it's just like with all the different pages out there online. I've been a part of the different pages, engaged in some way, somehow, along the way. So I've got an idea of how each one works, performs. Yes, the Sofa Sleuth page, which people can have a negative outlook on. Speaking of only more so in recent time, because of recent time, covering it from that perspective, at least for me, it'll be more limited, my knowledge, compared to being present on the Army case discussion page, which was much longer. Hence, where it shows I've been a part of the light side a lot longer than the dark side, but in a shorter space of time on the dark side, I've received a lot more criticism and in some ways some kind of attacks. Very interesting, isn't it, elsewhere? Says a lot. But the Sofa Sleuth page, a level of sharpness behind it. In terms of the post, in terms of the comments, people elsewhere would interpret it as there is a level of sharpness with venom in a nasty, hurtful way, and ammunition weaponized to hurt others and Justin Roy, etc. Do I see it that way? Well, I can't say much at this moment in time because I've not been around long enough in that presence to get a full perspective. but I do understand how people can interpret it that way. What I will say, though, is if it was the case and that material was weaponized and in the wrong hands by dark people, at least when I came across it myself and I did my own independent analysis and coverage to the best of what I could and what I had at times, it wasn't done with venom or sharpness, it was done with balance. And times previously where there might have been a bit of passion and a want, a drive by some to say, hey, ref, cover this or cover that, like with the Alicia Lee stuff and Caden Pressey things. Their intent or their mindset behind posting or wanting it to be shared, spread, maybe more so in a slightly darker or sinister way, which other people would interpret. But regardless of what material other people may have, even if it is weapons of mass destruction, as soon as the weapons of mass destruction are passed on to me, they turn into white fluffy pillows and feathers. Nice and balanced, with a nice level weight, pure and clean, working with what's available and trying to understand it. What I do, I'm like the anti-venom, okay? So there's a weapon, there is a tool, there is some kind of chemical within people, and they may push it out there, and it might hurt some along the way, and there might be collateral damage. I get a hold of it, or it's passed on to me. I take the venom out, I get the scalpel, I slice it into half or into whatever, and I look at it bit by bit. Not to weaponize, not to cause destruction or pain, but just to learn and to provide perspective with the case, for the case, and Noah Presgrove. You see how simple it is when you do that little reverse engineering of breaking it down bit by bit. So the Sofa Sleuth page, the presence there, and some of it externally expanding onto the case discussion page, in which post would quickly deleted, which is unfortunate in a way, but working with what one has, it has been quite hard-hitting in recent time. In regards to the case discussion page, in other ways, in the army page, not so much hard-hitting. That's just an observation. On the main Reddit page and the alternative one, not so much hard-hitting. So that's what I like to base it off. If, in response to Michelle, what's been the most helpful in recent time, or what's been the most hard-hitting, it would be the Sofa Sleuth page. Has it done much good for the case? It's done good for the case in learning about what could be true and filling in the gaps along the way. It can also be good in learning, as in indirectly learning people's true colours and how they may just simply react to some post and their attitudes and their behaviour, which is alongside the case in parallel to the people that obviously engage with the case and the community. All goes in the same direction, so it's all relevant and important. And I think some people along the way get lost and fail to acknowledge that, which is obviously very disappointing. That's where I'm at this moment in time. But you never know in the future, for as long as the case goes on for, if there's anything new that comes about, maybe the army page might become hard-hitting at a point, the case discussion, or the Reddit one. Obviously, the alternative would be the alt new Reddit page, which has come about, the review one, and there's been some never seen before material over there, which is hard hitting. Once again, is it directly linked to the case though? Not quite. Some of it is more historical, which links to the possible attitudes, mindsets of people within this case, and they may be protecting one another or doing the talking on behalf of somebody else in unnatural ways, like the Caden Pressey situation, possibly. The only reference to that, though, is bits added along the way on the alt page, but not full context or full angles or perspective, as in the footage. Can we see, can we identify who is who? Can we hear who is who? Not quite. Can we see a date or time? Not really. There's a bit of story building going on there, which could be finalized at some point, but it's a type of hard-hitting material I wouldn't want to jump in onto my channel, because if it's lacking a bit of context, but it does have a certain level of venom or darkness behind it, which could paint someone in a bad way, and if it is the truth. But along the way, if it did backfire, it wouldn't be too good on me. So some things need to be contained or controlled, but if things can still be posted to an extent, then that should be helpful. See, a slight dysfunction just recently, I guess, maybe on the case discussion page, was with Justin Roy that wanted proof. Justin wanted proof to see whether those Snapchat conversations existed or not with his daughter Hayley, apologising to Jasmine Milan. And, you know, if you ask for it, you demand for it, well then someone takes action, there's the evidence, it's posted. But then you say, how dare you do that? Why are you posting things like that when you know it's of a person of a younger age? You should know better. Well, if Justin is saying that, then why is Justin asking for them to be posted in the first place? It's like you're trapping someone. You know it's not a good idea, but you still want somebody to post it, so then when it is posted, you can tell them off for being a bad person. I don't quite get that. Like I said, it's like if you got two people know each other very well, or to an extent, both consent. Oh, touch here, touch there. A few seconds later, how dare you do that? That's rape. What? Led into a false sense of security. And context lacking as well, as in, oh, this requirement needed to be met. That should have been done. But there was no briefing at the time, only a debriefing. You can't have a successful debriefing if there was never a briefing in the first place. And that's like a microcosm of this case overall within the community aspect. It's unfortunate, which then leads to the breakdown in communication. Once again, mentioning another dysfunctional point in the case. But hopefully that clears that up to an extent there. I just wanted to give you a bit of an intro and my perspective of the different places, communities out there within the case. Maybe for most part of it, kind of, each like page or group has served as a useful, good way in the case at some point, but maybe not throughout all the time. I mean, some good moments, low moments, and a bit in between is what it is. Kind of natural. Obviously, with different pages you go to, you come across different sets of people with different ideas, fresh faces. That's also important as well. But there might be a few people along the way which are like, no, we only want to stick to one place, one community, keep it gated, and that's it, and ignore everything else. If you ignore everything else, you might miss out on a lot. And it's a bit more linear, tunnel vision. That doesn't help with learning about the case. And if you only go down one route or avenue, if that's closed off, goes wrong, it's countered, debunked, where do you go then? Because you haven't got as many options because you've closed them all off by then. So it's worth taking that into consideration. What we will do though now is move on to the main point discussions of today in regard to Noah Presgrave possibly falling out of a moving vehicle down the highway, in regard to how he ended up in that situation in the first place. I've already done a video about that, the possibilities. If you want to check that theory-based one out, should be up there, top right corner of the screen, you'll be able to find it. This time round, it's understanding how one could have fallen out in terms of the angle, on what side, and how they could have ended up on the west side of the hard shoulder near to the highway. Let's head on over. Here is Justin's comment from a day ago. I took the screenshot as of this moment in time of recording, so just take that as a reference. And it'll be like a video or two ago where he made the reference, more so on the one where it had the thumbnail of Noah's face and that vehicle, off-road pickup truck type thing. So it'll be that one, you'll be able to find it. Justin says, if Texas boys from the party were heading north, Noah was found on the west side of the road, correct? In my opinion, just falling out at the back of the truck would not cause all those injuries he had, and literally no blood for the injuries he sustained. Several people have said this, not just me. So first of all, this is Justin's opinion, but what needs to be highlighted in a positive way, regardless of what people may think of Justin at this moment in time, good language and wording has been applied here. Exactly how it should be most of the time. but some could argue it's not always. Sometimes Justin may jump in and say it as a fact or a statement, or that a certain percentage from a poll of a selective group or page represents the whole population of what they think is the cause of death in Noah Presgrove. You see the big contrast. Justin, and I'm not saying this in a supposed Jan Fiorillo patronising undertone way, I'm just saying it as a clear observation that Justin Roy is capable of using appropriate wording and language. And the reason why it's also important to highlight in regard to Justin specifically is the more often you use appropriate language and wording, that will subconsciously, psychologically have a positive effect on other people, including opposition, that will identify that you've taken the time to think before you type or speak. So people may be more lenient towards you. And if you mention it as an opinion as well, then they can't attack you as much. So just as a heads up, Justin, you're probably already aware, but in terms of the consistency of language and wording it like this, at least for the first small paragraph, it can help you. It can reduce the attacks on you. Now, in some ways, maybe the damage is already done and people's outlooks are already set in stone, but it's just because I put it in comparison with myself, because of how I've presented myself overall for most part of it, and with past cases. I can say this, I can present and do that without as many attacks because of that language and wording to begin with, theorising. Maybe not as confident as other people, but there's a level of innocence, genuinity behind it. And I think that goes a long way. So if other people want to, take that in mind and make notes for the future when you and whoever may do post or comments, it could help in the long run, just by saying it's an opinion. Now, do I think in regard, even though Justin didn't quite ask me this on the spot, I will give you my thoughts, okay? In terms of falling out of a vehicle, and that there is no clear identifiable blood, at least on the road, splatters, markings and stuff like that, or not enough. Do I think that's normal? It depends what I base it off. From things I may have seen or heard, like footage online of accidental deaths or gory stuff, there can be marks and traces of blood, depending if anything's in contact with the person or if anything was crushed. That will differ greatly. But if there is an absence of blood along the road and someone had fallen out, depending how they've fallen out, depending on the impact, could make you think more or less likely falling out of a vehicle, simply put. So I do understand what Justin is getting at here in terms of the blood situation, but there have been counterpoints by people that have said, well, when it comes to the blood element, it being absorbed in the body or something, I think. But I think it was Tim Daniel that made a reference that the blood was rather fresh at the time when the police came along. So the fresher it is, the later on the death took place. And if the death took place later with fresher blood, then it drifting away from Caden's timeline. Just as a little points to randomly throw in there. I mean, in terms of the freshness of the blood, was that quoted by police? Is there an article, a quote that can be referenced? If anyone knows, feel free to provide it down below. That could help. Let's just continue reading what Justin says here. I get it, Warlight Ref. You have to cover all the angles. Well, that's good to know that Justin acknowledges that. That's a big positive. But in my opinion, fair enough, this is just a common sense thing. Several people on scene, including the first LE, said they all knew it did happen there. Wait, is this like a typo? The first LE said they all knew the death happened there. Well, if the death happened there on site, then what? It's more of a vehicular-based death than a possible murder, maybe? Or are you saying, Justin, that because the first LE said the death occurred on the highway, then it must mean the blood should be present as well. But because the blood isn't present there, then it must mean the death took place elsewhere, and that's where the blood was at. Now, if that really was the case, and then foul play being involved, where was that blood? Where could it have been? Would it have been found or traced if the police firsthand at the time actually did a search of the property, or close to the property, closer onto the highway? Or would it have been washed away immediately, based on your opinion, your thoughts in regard to that question? Interesting. Falling out of a truck, not going to cause the crushing injuries. Okay, crushing injuries like with the neck, vertebrae, breaking, bones, breaking. I mean, in some regard, some bones can be broken when you do fall from a certain height, of course. But if it's only like, face down, the bones making contact with the ground. As for the bones behind on your back area, there's nothing crushing or hitting that part unless something falls on top of you after that point. So there's different ways of looking at it. You could always do like a negotiation-based thing where if a death did happen on the highway, if somehow one was to fall out of a vehicle, did somebody else finish the job? And when you start wording it like that, and other people have suggested it as an opinion, finishing the job, getting it done properly, it really does nail home a murder outcome, that. But we just work with it bit by bit. As for the overall picture of a possible angle, I can understand what Justin is getting at here, but because I've not reached that full angle perspective of one, I'm still looking at the components along the way because I don't want to miss anything. Then later I can conclude at a point in time. But I'm still, work in progress in regards to certain stuff. It can't be rushed because if it is, I might miss out on something and it could be detrimental in a way. Justin says, several people on scene. Not going to argue here. Okay, fair enough. Also, there's a different group of Texas boys, not the St. Joe Ho. Oh no, not Ho. Oh shit. St. Joe Texas boys. Right, okay. A different group of Texas boys. What? Who were present at the party? I do remember Caden Pressey saying there was different groups, but as for the names, I heard one reference to Pepe, maybe Jose or Juan. Oh, that's probably just coming in my mind. That's all. But then in response, Skippy, shout out to Skippy, says, oh, so there were at least 2 different groups of Texas boys at the party. Do you know if the St. Joe Ho boys were the group that rode on the side-by-side with Noah and also went looking for him later? Justin's response, the St. Joe boys did not go back Sunday night, from what another party goer said, so not sure why they would be mentioned. That's a fair point. If you didn't go back Sunday night and you weren't even there whatsoever Monday morning, then you're not quite directly linked to the death or outcome of Noah Presgrove, unless by some chance you may have not arrived on property on site at the party at the time, but you were driving by for some reason, passing by, then you could be a witness, but more of a covert one which has gone undetected. That's why I always just mention it in general speaking. Those from the party can be persons of interest to a certain varying degree and extent, but any strangers, at least, unknown people that may have been driving down the highway at a certain time could be very important and key. Whether they were aware of what they saw or didn't then, maybe blind, maybe too focused on other stuff, but that'd be interesting to know. Unfortunately, there's no cameras nearby on the highway. If there were cameras running down the highway and in the spot where Noah's body was at, the case would pretty much be solved, or should be solved, in a matter of seconds, you would hope, but never got that ideal outcome, which is unfortunate. I mean, when you look at the Aidan Clune missing person case, there was possible highway footage, which may have shown Aidan Clune parking up and crossing over the road to then go off into the desert area. Possibly. But at least there was opportunities of cameras there to say which direction or what time Aidan's car passed on down the highway. Just adds that, fills in the grey areas in a way. But that aside, in terms of the side-by-side rollover at the party house, which Caden had referenced occurred at 2:40 in the morning, regardless of how true that is, it's just a time to work with what little we have. Jack Newton in the past saying there was 5 to 6 passengers in that side-by-side, which is quite a few people. Now, how many seats does the side-by-side have? Now, some people had to hang on to the bars on the side of the vehicle, clinging on to it, because there was no space for them. Depending how they were positioned, all on one side or spread out, that could determine or be one of the causations behind the side-by-side rolling over, because of the extended weight added on, the one-sided unbalanced nature of it, literally causing that momentum shift of it rolling over. And if people were on that side as it rolls over, could have ended much worse for some people, possibly. But it didn't, but it could have done. Just worth highlighting. Will we ever hear about those people that were on that side-by-side rollover? I don't know. But for such a supposed insignificant event which wasn't linked directly to the death, it would have been nice if it was cleared up quicker. And it might have been much more helpful if people reached out, as in identifying who they were and who was in on that vehicle, because it would just help take it off the list, possibly debunk it. It would do a lot, to be honest, but it hasn't publicly, so it still remains a bit of a mystery. My response to Justin in regard to being on one side of the road, ending up on the other side, I said it does depend to an extent on, what side of the vehicle Noah may have fell off from, which is a fact. And Justin says, I agree, but there would be blood splatter from the fall to where he ended up. Literally no blood splatter at all, possibly moved there from a truck. If one was to be moved there from a truck, Justin, just as a question, do you think in the disposing they would have done it gently or abruptly and rough? So like if they were getting Noah's body out of the vehicle, would they be dragging him across the road, or would they be carrying him and then placing him down on the side of the hard shoulder? Would they gently put him down? Would they throw him down? What do you think? Whether it happened or not, what do you think there as a possibility? See, when it came to the Kenny Veach missing person case, his phone was found near the mineshaft, but there was no details from the search and rescue in regard to the condition of the phone it was in. Because if the phone was deemed as damaged or cracked, well then it either fell out the person's pocket or it was destroyed on purpose. If it was gently placed down the phone, sounds more like they knew what they were doing and they wanted it to remain in good condition, so it could be used as a marker or a tracer, a sign, a symbol in the future if anyone else goes looking for that person. So depending on the condition of something or someone, that can tell a story in regard to how they ended up that way or in that place, and by choice or not, in control or out of control. Here we are. So what you're currently looking at is a reconstruction of the highway, or at least a section of it, with the material that I have. And to make it a bit clearer, I've done it from a different angle and perspective. So just to put it into mind, where you see that top in the background and the wardrobe, heading that way could be considered going north. Whether that be the Texas boys going north to get back to Texas down the back roads, or if it be Noah Presgrove if he wanted a lift back home. In terms of coming towards the camera and lens, that would be going south towards the town of Terrell and even onto the casino. Now, when it comes to the US compared to such a country like the UK, it determines what side of the road you drive on. So I do have the vehicle by the side of me. Okay. This one, once again, I think it focuses in auto by itself to an extent. If you were in the UK and you were heading north, you would be on this side of the road, going up that way. But because we're talking about the US, and I think it applies to all states, correct me if I'm wrong, you can be driving on this side of the road, heading north. Of course, Noah Presgrave's body was found on the highway, the hard shoulder. And just to represent and explain what these lines mean, first of all, in the middle, we've got, I don't know if it's a white line. I'm just using the material that I've got with me. Just bear with me. It's like what separates the two different lanes, oncoming traffic and what's going onwards beyond. So the middle line separates it. So then you've got each lane left and right. North that way, south this way. This bit of material here is to represent the like white line hard shoulder. Okay. In terms of the material that I've used, apologies to Sharon. You see that material there? It's actually a zip. So I've actually used some of Sharon's clothing for this. So the clothing is in tatters. I know I was a little bit heavy-handed. But of course, if anyone wants to donate so Sharon can get some new clothing, you know, it can be, you know, through PayPal and whatnot. And don't worry, all proceeds will go towards her and definitely not me. I'll say that in a bit of a sarcastic way, don't worry. But shout out to Sharon, of course. And in terms of this material here, this was actually the material that was used to tie Sharon up in different ways, metaphorically speaking. That aside, let's focus back in, of course. I could shuffle around, but I don't know if you would see me clearly. I don't know if you can see my face or not. Kind of reminds me of the old videos that I would do, okay? So of course, I'm not going to be on the side of the road. My head's bigger than the road itself. But in terms of the hard shoulder, here, if you can see me, or the finger, this is where Noah's body was at. I can't remember if his head was facing towards the party house or if it was facing towards north. I personally can't remember, but definitely on the side. But the vehicle's over there, driving along. How does Noah end up over here? You've got to understand the width of the road and the lanes. It is possible, depends what side you fall out of the vehicle. In terms of the blood splatter or the lack of it, I know what Justin is getting at. But when it comes to other forms of falling, it does depend on the height of the fall, which can determine blood splatter, if there's any at all. And to put it into perspective, based off what I've witnessed, not in real life, but like what you may see on Twitter at times, the shocking, disturbing media, hopefully you can see my head, is that there has been video footage of people jumping or accidentally falling 20, 40 foot high buildings, towers, and landing on the ground, hitting splat sound. Was all blood everywhere? Blood splatters? No. Could there have been a pool of blood shortly after? Yeah. Obviously, the higher you are, you think it would be worse, or there would be more blood splatter. That's not always the case. So if there can be a lack of blood in the moment, at least, from a great height when one falls, and on hard ground, you would think if Noah Presgrave was to fall out of a moving vehicle, it's not such a great height for it to cause blood splatter, unless he was hit by other things along the way. Now, there's been some footage where a person may have fallen or been pushed into the road somehow. The initial fall wasn't that bad, but then drove over by a truck or a bus and the head turning into a watermelon, then it does splatter. So there's different outcomes. If one was to fall out the vehicle and hit the ground, there'd be a bit of force, of course, but was there any barriers, signposts to wrap the body around or hit, cause additional injury? No. Past the hard shoulder, you've got like the grass verge and fields, which would be a soft landing, but no contact there. It's just worth taking it all into mind. Of course, you could add all these components up and say, well, then surely he didn't fall out of a vehicle. I said, I'm just working it out bit by bit. I just want to look at the aspect of how one can fall out and how it can still apply to being found over here. I'm going to come back to the camera so you can hear my voice a bit better. I think I'm getting cramp in my leg, which isn't the best of times, but let's just do what we can. Is it possible to zoom in? Hopefully it doesn't mess it up too much. Kind of works. Maybe just position it a little bit better like that. Am I too generous in the width of the road or not? I mean, if I centered it more to the middle and move it back so you can still see the line in the center. That's just my knee popping. There's the supposed pickup truck, or the truck bed in the back. Texas boys possibly driving it, maybe oblivious to Noah being in the back. At first, maybe Noah asleep. And as it's driving down onwards, at some point Noah wakes up, wonders what's going on. Why is the vehicle moving? Hey, what's happening? And as he stood up in a moving vehicle, due to the motion, momentum, and or if there's any bumps in the road, or just himself and with being somewhat drunk, unstable, unsteady on his feet, which caused him to fall out. Because when you're in the back of a pickup truck, the bed of it, if there's no covering on top or roofing and you're just stood up, kind of in the open, whereas you might get the outline of the truck itself, the bed, it's not enough to hold you in. If you lean over or climb out, jump out, fall out, it can happen, it will. With movement and momentum, you could be flung out, whether you're pushed or not. But which way would Noah have fell if he had fallen out? He could have fallen out to the right, but of course, if you fall out to the right, you're closer to the hard shoulder on the east side. So up there is north. To the side there, where the material is looking east towards the wall. And then that way, where you see the hard shoulder there, that's the west side, which Justin is referring to. So I'll keep it close nearby so it's easier to see. Driving down, whether Noah was facing north or not in the vehicle, and he fell out of the vehicle to the side. Likely, you could somehow land on the side of the hard shoulder east, but that's not where he was found. It was on the other side. And from there to there, there's more of a gap. And if you fall out on the right-hand side of the vehicle heading north, you fall out on the right-hand side, you're not going to end up on that side. You're going to end up on this side, more likely. Very likely. If you used to fall out the back of it, are you more likely to end up in the middle of the road? Kind of like where the shorts were at. There's high chances being kind of in the middle, or still chances of being there on this side, the east side of the hard shoulder, but higher chances of being found in the middle of this north lane or middle of the actual road divide itself. The only way, really, or more likely, is if Noah was in the back and fell out to the left, this left. So as it's moving along and the momentum falling out, hold on, rolling, making contact, and then eventually stopping on the hard shoulder. But is that believable? Is that likely? And I'll just try and zoom in just a little bit more. Oh, bloody hell, that's a little bit too much, isn't it? That will do. And I will stand over there just to demonstrate it. I don't know if the volume... Look at me, look at Warlike Raph. Warlike Raph on his hands and knees. Yeah, you like that? I'm sure one person does. Okay. There is an actual criticism of this type of stuff that I do, and we will get to that in a few minutes. But whilst driving along, I know he's in the back, off balance, falls. How he falls, I wonder how. Oh, shit, not quite like that. Does he fall head first? causing the injuries there, first of all? Does he fall face first? Does he fall on his back, like that? Either way, one with a bit of momentum can bounce across the ground. It does also come down to the speed of what the vehicle's travelling at as well. The faster you're going and the more momentum when you do fall out. Bouncing and dragging along, possibly causing possible road rash on a certain side, was it the left-hand side of the back area? A little bit of grazing on the short, the buttocks, cheek area, more so the left. Falling out, hitting the ground, the vehicle drives on unaware, hit somehow, first impact, bounce maybe, roll, bounce, roll, and then finally stop at this point, or there. I don't know if I've got it in shot or not. And finally lands here on the west side of the hard shoulder. Would there have been blood splatter traces diagonally or at a certain angle for it to show moment of impact, where it rolled or dragged to where the body ended up at properly? Depends. As I said, it comes down to like what I've seen in terms of footage when people may have fallen off a vehicle or been pushed off, as if scraped and dragged across the ground. There hasn't always been blood splatter or drag marks in a way. It might come down to the speed. It might come down to the level of impact and the height of the fall as well. And it's not a great height of a fall either. But if you are in the back, the bed of the truck, you might be a little bit higher up than if you was like sitting down in the seat of the passenger area. But you can let me know your thoughts in regard to it. I just wanted to put into perspective there. Moving on, Skippy actually made a last minute comment whilst I was recording my video. So it goes to show how raw and how close it is when people are commenting 2 minutes ago when I took the screenshot. So shout out to Skippy, you know, really jumping on in last minute, but I get to read it and we'll see what they've got to say in response to me. Even if Noah was pushed from or fell out of a moving vehicle, the true mystery of the undamaged white shorts persist. Exactly. And that's why I can't come to a full conclusion, even if Justin Roy says, well, based off supposed common sense and lack of blood or blood splatter, it can't be a means of falling or being pushed out of a moving vehicle. But what Skippy says here about the shorts, that will make things a bit clearer in different ways, that if it somehow reinforces foul play, then more likely a form of murder, possibly. You can get levels of foul play through, I guess, what would you call it, manslaughter, where it wasn't directly intended for that outcome to happen, but it did. People panicked, worried, and then started adjusting, moving, hiding stuff. That's to an extent as well that needs to be acknowledged. But, you know, when the white shorts stuff and coverage can be done, material, videos, screenshots, photos, and it's actually clear enough to identify with Noah in the moment of the party, for example, then I'll do so. But that's yet to happen. But when it's available, when it does, as soon as possible, I'll make a video about it. Okay? Let's just finish off Skippy's comment. Clothing can be removed during falls from moving vehicles, but usually experience a form of significant damage. I would agree. When the body lands or skids on the ground, or if somehow clothing tugged or got caught on part of the vehicle when you fell out, it could cause ripping and tearing. There was more damage to Noah's black shorts than there was to the white shorts. It says a lot. The speed of the vehicle, or even standing whilst the vehicle is moving, could have caused the shorts to billow or flap, dislodge. But it would seem some sort of damage would have occurred when they flew off him, yet there wasn't even a snag mentioned by the ME. Jack said the white shorts were in the middle of the road, a little north of Noah's body, so they landed near him, but more so in front of him, which is interesting. Were not further picked up by the vehicle's generated wind. Not saying it's impossible for the shorts to fly off him and land near him undamaged, but it's just very odd and further adds to the mystery. So the alternative to how white shorts could end up where they were based off the theory and concept of foul play tampering with evidence is when black shorts were taken off, removed, white shorts were going to be replaced or may have been added onto Noah's body, but in a short amount of time they just didn't or couldn't do it. Or there was oncoming traffic from a distance, or they heard something that spooked them, so they just chucked the shorts up in the air, which landed in the middle of the road, possibly, and then people scarpered the area. That might be hard to believe, but it's just throwing it out there as theories and counterpoints. We can go into it deeper at a later point. We can probably tie it all in together when it comes to the heavy focus of the white shorts, proof video clips of it if possible. At this moment, it's not available. I'm sure with time it will be, and then it can be done, and hopefully done rather well. Hopefully you found the video somewhat interesting, and more importantly about my thoughts on the case and the physics, even though I'm not an expert of falling out of a moving vehicle. Appreciate your patience, and if you do want to catch up on recent coverage, you can always do so top right corner where the eye symbol is up there, the drop down box. You want to leave a comment down below to spread awareness, that'll be helpful. A thumbs up and sharing the video will be much appreciated so more people get to see this and the dysfunctions and the reconstructions to provide visual learning. And if anyone wants to support the channel in a more practical, anonymous way, so nobody else sees and nobody else bashes or attacks you, down below in the comment section, pinned message by me, there will be a PayPal link. With that being said, my name is Warlight Raf. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night for now.